patients! Stop arresting patients! Stop arresting patients!
Welcome to CMMNJ TV.
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana.
I'm Ken Walski, Executive Director of the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey. The mission of our organization is to educate the public about the benefits of marijuana. Marijuana is a safe, effective, and inexpensive therapeutic agent for a wide variety of diseases, symptoms, and conditions. No patient should suffer needlessly without it, and no patient should ever go to jail for following the advice of a doctor. Join us and learn more about the exciting science of medical marijuana. Welcome to CMMNJ TV. I'm Ken Walski, Executive Director of the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey. I'm here in the Princeton Community TV studios today with Dave Borden, one of the pioneers of drug policy reform on the internet. Dave, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Ken.
So Dave, your organization, you've been doing this online for 23 years now, I understand. You started in 1993. There was barely an internet in 1993, Dave.
Well, maybe 1 in 5 or 6 people or adults had internet then, but it was the early days of the commercial internet, and it was an innovative thing to do at that time, organizing. And we were the first concerted effort online to get the movement organized and communicating. It was around the same time that the Surgeon General, the first Surgeon General in the Bill Clinton administration, Joycelyn Elders, had made a remark, actually just responding to a question, saying that drug legalization is something that should be studied. It might reduce crime, and she wasn't sure what the ramifications were. And she took a great deal of heat for that. It was arguably the beginning of the end of her tenure as Surgeon General, although a few other things happened. But I thought it was time to jump in and step things up.
That's great. Was she referring to drug legalization in general or just marijuana legalization at the time?
The question was about drug legalization in general.
Mm-hmm.
Now she has stayed supportive and has lent her name to some efforts relating to certainly the marijuana legalization. Mm-hmm. Since that time, she supported syringe exchange efforts.
Yeah. And you actually started with, it was called the DRC-Net, Drug Reform Coordination Network, and now it's called StopTheDrugWar.org?
Yes. We still technically DRC-Net is the name of our nonprofit corporate entities, mm-hmm. but we mostly go by StopTheDrugWar.org.
Mm-hmm. And so you've been publishing this weekly newsletter, I know is very famous in the drug reform community, the Drug War Chronicle, it's called, and you've been doing that every week since 1997, Dave.
We have, though I should give credit to our writer, Phil Smith, who does most of it. I mostly edit it, put together the email editions at the end, and of course confer with Phil. So he deserves most of the credit, and Phil's been on staff since 2000.
I was going to ask you how big a staff you have. You're based in Washington, D.C.?
We're based in Washington. We have just 2 of us on staff right now. Mm-hmm. The changes in the economy and the movement were hard on us, so there's a chance we'll be expanding again, particularly through this work we're doing on international drug policy. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and probably moving into the Students for Sensible Drug Policy office, actually. And Phil works remotely most of the time from California.
Mm-hmm. And you were instrumental in starting the SSDP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, and you worked in reforming the laws against loss of student aid. Isn't that correct, Dave?
That's right. Many viewers probably are aware that there's a law that takes financial aid for college away from students because of drug convictions. It's a federal law. It's been narrowed. That was one of the victories of the campaign. It's currently limited to people who are in school at the time of their drug convictions. It's not always a permanent ineligibility. It can be a year or 2 years or indefinite, depending on what types of convictions and how many. It almost got scaled back again in 2010. The House actually passed language to limit it to sales convictions, but that got stripped out and never taken up by the Senate due to the congressional jockeying on the healthcare reform law and the student aid package that this was part of. They got combined when the Democrats were trying to pass both, and the section that this reform was part of doesn't fit. There's actually a bill now in the Senate, co-sponsored by Orrin Hatch of all people, to completely repeal that law.
Really?
Shows how much times have changed.
Wow.
But SSDP was founded out of that law and people's reaction to it, and we worked with the early students. Some of our staff members who were students or student age did the early national organizing. We sponsored the first conference as well.
Yes, SSDP is a great organization. What was your undergraduate degree?
Astrophysics.
Astrophysics. And so how did you come to be involved in drug policy reform with a background in music and astrophysics?
Well, it took me about 20 years to figure out if there's a connection between all these things. And I'll tell you what I've come up with, and maybe there'll be some viewer feedback whether it really works or not. With a science background, I'm able to set aside popular assumptions and the emotional impact that some issues have, and at least try to think about issues based on facts and logic. As a creative person, maybe I have the imagination to envision what a world with a different drug policy, a very different drug policy, might look like.
Oh, that's terrific. Absolutely terrific.
But what happened in terms of my life is I had just been feeling for a while that I wanted to do something to save the world, like a lot of us feel like, as you probably did when you got into this issue and others. And so I started posting bulletins to internet talk groups, the early ones known as the Usenet. And
the bulletin boards. Back in the day,
yeah.
bulletin boards, yeah.
Yeah, not the earliest ones, but fairly early ones. And people signed up for a list and had the makings, became an organization, and funding happened to become available in the issue a short time later.
Well, I think it's certainly, to me, it's the central issue in America today is our drug policy and how much harm it does, not only to individuals but to societies in general.
And I think even when a drug offense isn't the direct cause of that, it's a real contributor at so many stages, providing a financial, economic reason for people to get involved in crime, as you pointed out, to when people have that point on their record, can trigger laws that require incarceration or that influence judges negatively, or that just make it hard to get other jobs because they have a record. That may be the most widespread impact of things.
Right. So I see here in your report you refused to report for jury service as a protest of the drug war. We've been encouraging people to report to jury service, in terms of being able to nullify the laws against drug offense, since so many court cases involve drug offenses.
I think we should be as sparing as we can in terms of involving people in the criminal justice system, whatever one thinks gun policy should be in a larger sense. And so the prosecutor and the judge particularly wanted to know would I strictly follow the law, and if the facts say this person possessed a gun illegally in the district, even if it was just in his car trunk, whatever I thought was, even if I thought he just carried that to protect himself if he needed it, would I vote strictly with the law to convict, regardless of my views? And I had to tell them, I need to see the full set of facts of a case before I really can know what is right. And they asked me the same thing about 12 different ways, not using the word nullification. The defense lawyer did too. But that was all I could say. And then, to my surprise, I was picked for the jury pool the first time. I assumed the defense lawyer wanted me. Then I was struck on the next round, presumably by the prosecutor or the judge. So the next time I got my summons, and I thought, well, they're not going to put me on a jury. At least I didn't think it was likely, and it just seemed like going through the motions nonsense. And I dislike much of what the criminal justice system is doing. Not everything by any means, but much of it. So I decided to make a statement. In my open letter to the chief judge, Rufus King, whose father was one of the early great drug reform activists, Rufus King Jr., who I knew, I laid out my critique of the justice system, and I pointed out the unlikelihood of my actually being picked for a jury as well. So that doesn't apply to most people. So this was not meant at all to discourage serving on juries or any of the thoughtful approaches that we and our allies advocate for that. And so it and David Gard, our associate director at the time, he's one of the operators of the handful of medical marijuana dispensaries in the district right now. But he was our associate director then. He received a summons about 2 weeks later, coincidentally, and he sent in his own note with a copy of my letter. And so it transpired over a long period of time, the judicial system, civil system in this case. And so we were called before Judge King together, and we respectfully refused his order to report for jury service. And so what he did, what he did was and this was a Friday, he gave us until Monday to comply with his order, at which point he said that we would each be subject to a $100 fine per day each day that we held out for as long as we did. Now, he also signaled to our attorney, a pro bono, very good and prominent attorney in the area, that he ultimately wouldn't stick us with the fines if we were attempting such other part of the process. Judges and lawyers seem to have some kind of secret code that they communicate, use to communicate things like that with each other. And so 2 weeks later, we went back, and our attorney proposed that as an alternative to jury service, that we each do some community service in a number of hours that would be sufficient to deter other people from using this tactic just to avoid jury service, that only serious people might do this. And Judge King didn't accept that, but he, along with vacating the fines, he he changed the continuing penalty to 8 hours a week of community service. And he allowed us to serve that at Prevention Works, syringe exchange program, which was operating in the district at the time. And we did that for a couple of weeks, and it was a very positive experience being there, but 8 hours a week when you're busy at your own job is actually a lot, we found out. And ultimately we couldn't do the time. So we agreed at that point we would report for jury service. And we both, again, when we ultimately reported, actually, I never made it through the poll the next time. Just the numbers. I wasn't even called. And David was called, and he found his profession came up again in the discussion, and he didn't get through the selection process for a jury either. And then I moved to Maryland a couple of years later, and I got a jury summons from D.C. They didn't have that information, so I sent a final letter to Judge King telling him that I would have agreed to report this time, but I'd moved to Maryland. One more thing, I got an email from Ed Fortune at the time, who was concerned because, as you pointed out, we want people to get on juries. And I wrote back, explained what we were doing, how my situation was unique, and we got an article in the Washington Post about it, talking about why we did this. And Ed wrote back, said I changed his mind, that the value of the press coverage, along with our reasons and our situation, outweighed the other concern.
What is it? Adam Eidinger was he part of your organization at one time?
Adam is a close ally and partner. He's employed by the company Dr. Bronner's Magic Soaps.
Dr. Bronner's.
And mostly, if not entirely, for advocacy, and they're a big supporter of ours.
But you follow all the issues. I mean, you're a national and you're an international concern. I mean, you follow so many issues. Tell me about some of the big drug policy reform issues that are going on right here in America now. I see in New England there's some very exciting things happening. A lot of several states are discussing legalization of marijuana, correct?
That's correct. And in fact, the Vermont Senate is the first state legislative chamber in the United States to pass a legalization bill. And so hopefully that will go through the House and be signed by the governor supporting it. I don't know the details of where that's at. Rhode Island is a good candidate for the State House route. Massachusetts has a legalization initiative set for the ballot. Maine is up in the air. The state government, which is headed by an insane governor who even other Republican politicians in the state detest, invalidated many of the signatures over a claim that the notary's signature on them did not match the signature they have on file, which I haven't looked at the signatures. I've heard that they do look pretty similar, and that's being contested in court.
So they're working on a ballot initiative for legalization in Maine as well.
Yeah, and it really hinges on right now whether MPP and their local people prevail in court in getting this decision by the state officials overturned. It really sounds like a wrongful decision. Caveat that I haven't looked at documents or details myself. What we don't know is whether the courts ever overturn those kinds of decisions, even if they're bad. If they do, this seems like a candidate for it, and then we'll have an initiative, probably a victory in Maine.
How does it look in California right now?
I think it looks good. I mean, there's a lot of money that needs to go into this to do it right. It sounds like the money's likely there. There's a coalition of ultra-rich people led by Sean Parker, formerly of Facebook and Napster, and I think Dr. Bronner's is contributing to that. And we've heard the figure 20 million thrown out for its budget. Sounds like a lot, but California is a very expensive, large state.
Yeah.
I think it looks pretty good. Of course, none of these things are ever a given until
Right.
they're done.
Right.
There's also Arizona and Nevada, where it's anticipated there are tough fights. We're hoping for victories there, but those, along with Maine for different reasons, are the least predictable. Another critical issue is sentencing, one of the most brutal parts of our drug policy. And we're at a time that in which the politics have more or less reversed from when I first got into this. After the last congressional election in 2014, there was a whole set of articles you could find saying that one of the few issues, if not the only issue, that the two parties in Congress could be able to come together on and do something is sentencing reform. And there are a number of bills, one in particular. They don't do everything we'd like by any means, but they have support in both chambers. Now, in the Senate, there are some regressive Republicans who are opposing this and slowing it down, and we hope they won't succeed in blocking it. There are other Republicans who are strongly supporting this. The Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has not scheduled hearings or a vote on this bill because he says because he doesn't have a united caucus, and we think that's wrong and that he should allow this to move forward and people to vote up or down. So there's resistance, but also rather strong bipartisan support for moving forward on the first steps towards sentencing reform.
Well, it's great, doing away with some of the mandatory minimums, I suppose, and
yeah, at least a start. I mean, a significant start.
and releasing drug criminals.
Yeah, I think this bill would make the reforms to crack sentencing that were passed, was it 2010, retroactive. Now, what's going on? Now, you might remember back in 1998, there was a major UN session on drugs in New York, the UNGAS, UN General Assembly Special Session on the World Drug Problem is what they call it. And in a few weeks from now, the 19th through the 21st, is the first UNGAS to take place since then. So it's the highest level UN drug policy meeting in almost 20 years. And we've been working on this since 2014, organized a primarily U.S. coalition to press for some good policy stances from the U.S. government and for change at the UN. We work with NGOs from around the world, U.S. and
Non-government
elsewhere.
organizations,
correct.
like my own,
Right, like
Coalition
your
for
own.
Medical Marijuana, New Jersey.
And right, CMMNJ is signed on to at least one of the group documents we've produced. And there are a handful of issues, and the two of the most direct interest to CMMNJ would be one, the progress of medical cannabis internationally, eliminating any international policies that may discourage countries from adopting medical laws, and secondly, the three UN drug conventions, which have treaty language that's problematic, not necessarily for medical, but for legalization. And we want to see the UN take up treaty reform. and the U.S. to champion that. This year's UNGAS was something that happened later at the request of Colombia, Mexico, and Guatemala, wanting to talk about changes and new directions for drug policy. What's happening in 2019 has been specified for the agenda since 2009. It's a review of a declaration and strategy that the UN adopted in 2009. So beyond this UNGAS, if we don't get what we want, and we always knew it would be hard this year, we're on a new 3-year timetable to influence things for the next UN session at that level. Not that we're waiting 3 years. There are major annual sessions of a body called the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, a subset of the UN member states that sets international drug policy or does work on it. And there's smaller meetings throughout the year. And then we want to get more UN agencies and more US agencies involved in global drug policy, or more involved. We'd like to see the standing of, say UN AIDS, the UN Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, UN Development Program. They've started to weigh in more on drug policy. It's been encouraged as part of the process of the UNGAS.
Now, UNAIDS is Agency for International Development, or is that?
UNAIDS works on HIV/AIDS issues.
Oh, HIV/AIDS.
UNDP is the development issue. And one good thing that's come out of this UNGAS is that there has been a process to involve a wider set of agencies in drug policy. We'd like to see even more of that. We'd like to see the decision-making diversified, a broader set of agencies working with equal centrality, not have it all coordinated by, one drug, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, which actually has a lot of good positions and does some progressive work. I'm not painting UNODC as the enemy.
Thank you so much for coming to CMMNJ TV. For more information about the Coalition for Medical Marijuana in New Jersey, join us at our free public meetings on the second Tuesday of every month at the Lawrence Township Library in Mercer County, New Jersey, from 7 to 9 p.m. Snacks are served and all are welcome. Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone's arrested for marijuana.
Cada 42 segundos está uno arrestado por marihuana.
Every 42 seconds, somebody is arrested for...
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana. It could be you.